everybody. How we doing? Wow, I sound really loud and echoey. I've got a few specified treats here tonight. Some Reese's peanut butter pumpkins. Just stay where you are. You might get one. There's one over there, right there. There's a few right there, all the way over there, all the way back there. That's it. That's it. But come back next week. We've got a lot more Halloween candy for you next week as we draw closer to that sacred holiday. Hey, speaking of, how many of you guys are excited about Halloween? It's less than 2 weeks away. Who in here dresses up still in a costume of some kind for Halloween? I'm keeping my hand up because I usually do too. That's great. All right, that's fantastic. Stephen mentioned earlier, I think it was Stephen, said something about Scarowinds. Some of us are going to Scarowinds. And you guys already been up there this year to Scarowinds? Yeah, I saw pictures of, and Sean and Lily, a few of you guys up there. Didn't you go to? Yeah, at Scarowinds last weekend. So it's kind of fun. So everybody listen up. Shh. I found, everything's Halloween these days. And so I just found something online. I don't remember where, but it was about classic Halloween movies and how some of them have these original movie titles that were less than subpar, let's say. So here's a couple examples of that. Friday the 13th, probably one of the most famous series horror movies, right? Do you know what the original title for Friday the 13th was? No, nothing close. Here's what it was. Long Night at Camp Blood. Can you imagine watching 11 movies that are Long Night at Camp Blood? Okay, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Anybody ever heard of that one? It's like way back, an old one, but So Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original movie title for that was Head Cheese. Explain that to your neighbor. Okay, and then one that you might be more familiar with is the one Scream. Who's seen any of the Scream movies? Anybody? Shouldn't admit that here in church. It's terrible. No. So Scream was originally called Scary Movie. And the irony of that is that eventually they made a parody called Scary Movie about Scream and all the other horror movies. But interesting. And then that led me to another article that had names of children's books that were somehow associated with the dread of Halloween or horror or something like that. These are bad children's book titles, okay? These are books that you wouldn't want your kids or little kids that you babysit to read, okay? Here are just a couple examples of some of the titles. Strangers Have the Best Candy. It's a good title for a children's book, right? Here's another one. Grandpa Gets a Casket. Okay? Here's another one. The Kid's Guide to Hitchhiking. Yes, not advisable. Okay, here's another one. Curious George and the High Voltage Fence. No one's read that one before? Okay, here's another one. This doesn't even have to do with Halloween, but I think it's funny. Things rich kids have, but you never will. Okay, there you go. That's a good one. How about this one? Children's book title, Your Nightmares Are Real. Okay, and then finally, last one, I like this one. It says, Where Would You Like to Be Buried? Okay, so children's books that I wouldn't recommend to you, all right? So, hey, listen, before we jump in here, I want to say one more quick thing about LOL. Everybody, give me your eyes here. Listen up. LOL, I know the guys mentioned it earlier, our fall retreat is coming up in less than a month, all right, which is crazy. So we finally had like one cool day of fall this week, so it finally feels a little bit like fall. But it'll be much cooler up there, I guarantee it, next month. It's going to be an incredible weekend. Listen, we're so excited. We've been making preparations for this weekend for a while now. And Jesse and I, just today, we're talking with our good friend Chris Dew. How many of you guys remember Chris from last year, Celebration Nights? Chris is not only going to be there with us to speak, but get this. His buddy, who he's good friends with, Peyton Bryant, who came and spoke with us on Nerd Night a few Celebration Nights ago. Young guy, good-looking guy, girls, whatever. No, he did a great job. Peyton's going to come along, too, so we've got a tag team. We're going to hear from Chris as well as Peyton over LOL weekend. It's just going to be an incredible weekend. So I just want to encourage you, if you have not signed up, we still have space. We have had a great sign-up already, but we still have space available. And if you have any issues with the registration, some of you guys were telling me that, or even issues with money and figuring that out, please come talk to me. We want you on that trip. We want you there for that weekend. It's going to be life-changing and going to be incredible. So make sure that you sign up for that as it's coming quickly, all right? Hey, let me share this with you. When I was your age, back in the 80s, maybe the 1980s, all right, 1880s, a long time ago, I remember that the jeans that everybody was wearing back in the 80s, okay, were Levi's. Everybody wore Levi jeans back in the 80s, okay? If you have parents, some of them might, you might have heard this before, all right? So the first real job that I used to have all these what I called suck jobs, but the real job that I got that I earned some decent money, I saved up as much money as I could until I could finally buy me a pair of dark blue Levi jeans. And wouldn't you know, as soon as I finally saved up enough money to buy those dark blue Levi jeans, everyone had moved on from that and we're wearing something closer to what you all wear now, and that is faded jeans with holes in them, believe it or not. So it's all comes full circle as it is. So just when I thought I was on top of it, things changed behind again. I was talking this week with Anthony. Y'all know Anthony, our middle school pastor? Yeah. Anthony, who's much more into style and fashion than me, of course. Anthony was telling me not long ago, well, first of all, you got to know this. If you know Anthony, you know that he is seriously into shoes, into tennis shoes, all right? He loves him some tennis shoes, especially Adidas shoes, all right? And so Anthony, this summer, the only challenge with with that passion is that he's a middle school pastor, so he doesn't get paid a lot. So, he has to kind of temper that. But this summer, he kind of splurged, and he went and he bought himself a pair of Ultra Boosts, I think is what he said, all right, Adidas shoes. And the day he got that was a good day. I mean, he was so pumped, so excited to, post it, show off to his friends a little bit. But he tells me that Nate Calhoun, Nate's been recognized twice here tonight. Where is Nate? He's still in the house? He's wandering around. Who knows? His attention span, it comes and goes. There he is. So he tells me that Nate Calhoun had also had a pair of the white ones, and so when he went, he decided he was not just going to buy a pair of the white ones, but he was also going to buy a pair of the black ones, just so he could one up Nate. Probably when he could still get Sarah Floyd's discount, I would imagine this summer or something like that. So anyway, isn't that funny? This is the way that we are. Has this happened to you? Maybe not with shoes, but with something. Okay, you think about. What we think about is like who you're hanging out with versus who someone else is hanging out with. You think about your house versus their house. You think about your accomplishments versus their accomplishments, all right? Ever gauge yourself from somebody else's life? All of us do. Been there, done that. We all have done that at some point in time. It may be for a couple reasons. It may be because we're competitive. Who's competitive in the house here tonight, all right? When I was growing up, if my brother would ever beat me in a game of one-on-one basketball, I would ask him to play again, and then he'd know he wouldn't, and I'd have to pay him. I would pay him to play me again until I could finally beat him, and then I could move on. That's being competitive right there, a little too competitive, right? Maybe it's because we're competitive. Maybe it's because we're jealous of somebody else and something they have. Maybe it's because we want to feel like we have this, exciting life of some kind. But there's more to it than just that. I think we all have a desire and we have a fear that works like this. One simple statement. We want to measure up. We want to measure up. And we're afraid that we're not measuring up. And so we're worried that we're going to find out that someone else is more popular, that someone else is liked more, someone else is more in style, up to date, someone is more talented than we are. And you saw a minute ago that video clip, from that intro video clip, that social media, can make us feel like that. But social media isn't the only thing that makes us feel that way. It's everywhere. We feel it when we're hanging out with friends at school. We feel it like we play sports. We feel when we just watch TV. There's something in all of us that we're trying to figure out, answer this question. How am I doing? Am I acceptable? Am I measuring up? And what we hope to see when we look to our left or we look to our right is basically this. We all want the added to the adjectives that describe us. Turn to your neighbor and say There you go. Not gur, yeah. It's the ER sound is what I'm after here, okay? We all want the We want to be, we want to be cooler, prettier, richer, skinnier, happier, smarter, hipper, talenteder. Okay, that's not a word. we want more I want more than you because then I feel better about myself. Now listen, some of us don't stop there. Some of us go beyond the okay? And the isn't good enough. We want not only to be richer, we want to be richest. We want to be smartest. We want to be happiest. We want to be retweetedest. Another made up word. We want this category all by ourselves so that people will look at us and say, man, I wish I was like him. Or man, I wish I was like her. And this is why so many of us feel so dissatisfied every time we look in the mirror, every time we look at a post on Snapchat, every time we take a test at school, every time we're at a ball game of some kind, we feel dissatisfied with ourselves. And that voice in our head says something like, you will never be as fill in the blank as them. Guys, you'll never be as, happy as them. You'll never be as athletic. You'll never be as good looking. You'll never drive that car, whatever it is. So what do we do with that part of us? We all have that part of us, whether it's a big part or it's a small part. What do we do with that? Okay? Let's take a look at a couple things said tonight by a king named Solomon. If you have the Bible in your phone, or if anyone brought hard copy Bible, good for you. Turn over there to Ecclesiastes, okay? Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And while you're turning there, the Bible calls Solomon the wisest man who ever lived, okay? Solomon's not somebody you wanted to compare yourself to because he'll win every time. He did more than you'll ever do. He had more money than you'll ever have. He had kings and queens traveling to sit at his feet and ask for wisdom, for crying out loud. I mean, he was the guy to be. And so he has something to say about this, the man who has it all, about our tendency to compare ourselves to other people and to each other in an effort to measure up. So if you're there in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, and if you're not, I think the verses are going to come on the screen here. But just a couple verses here. Here's what he has to say in this first verse, Ecclesiastes 4:4. He says, and I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. Did you hear that? All of our toil and achievement spring from one person's envy of another. So basically he's saying, listen, I've been watching people for a while. Okay, I've experienced a lot in my life. And for the most part, the thing that drives them more than anything else is competition, their behavior. They're looking at their shoulder, over their shoulder, what everyone else is doing. And based on what everybody else is doing, that's what they choose to do. And that drives what they wear, who they hang out with, all these things when they see what other people are doing. Now think about that, guys. That was 3,000 years ago that this guy wrote that. Some people say that the Bible is not relevant to where we live today. That's like spot on as to where things still are today, right? Probably even more so than they might have been in his day. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about because in our attempt to measure up, this has been going on for a long time. We determine who we are based on what everyone else is doing and saying. And then he goes on in verse 4 and he says right after that, this too is meaningless. It's chasing after the wind. Okay, so he's saying comparison and trying to measure up with other people, it's like chasing after the wind. Solomon goes on and he says in verse 5, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves, but better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. What does that mean? Okay, in other words, he's saying, he's not telling you not to be ambitious, to sit around and do nothing. He's not saying that. But he's saying it's better to have one hand open. But what do I mean by that? Okay? Meaning, if you have one hand open, God can put in or take out whatever he wants to. But if you have both hands, two fists clenched together like this, and you're hanging on to everything else, it's not going to work. Why? Because when you're tightening your grip and your fingers around every single thing that you have, there's always going to be something else that you can't grab hold of. No matter how much you have, you're always going to want something else that you can't get. And more importantly, you'll never have peace. And Solomon goes on, and he says in verse 8, there was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother, and there was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. Solomon's saying, there are a lot of people out there who work hard, and you should work hard, okay? So hear me on this. There are a lot of people out there who work and work and work and are never content. We like to call them workaholics sometimes, right? They work and work and work, but there's never a sense of contentment. You probably know somebody like that. There's always more to do. There's always something more to achieve, a title or whatever. And Solomon says that this never-ending worker ends up asking this question later in verse 8 that says, for whom am I toiling? In other words, what's the point of all this? Why am I doing all this with my life? Why am I constantly looking to the left or the right and wondering if I'm okay or if I measure up with the people around me? So he says in verse 8, for whom am I toiling and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? Why is it, guys, that we can't stop and enjoy the things that we've been given in our lives because we're so driven to this other goal? And Solomon's very clear. He's just right on. Left to ourselves, by ourselves, what we do, our natural instinct, is to simply take cues from the people that are around us. And whatever they're doing, we compare ourselves with them. We compete with them in hopes to just measure up to whatever they're doing. And he summarizes that one more time, like he started at the beginning in verse 8. And he says, this too is meaningless. This comparison game, this competition game. In fact, he says it's a miserable business, okay, in the end of verse 8. Because as long as you have two handfuls clenched together like this, you're going to wish you had a third hand to just grab more stuff that was out there, because you can never get yourself enough of that if you're playing that game, and you're never going to enjoy your life either. No matter what you accomplish, no matter how many games you win, no matter how cute that girl is that you have on your shoulder, it's still going to be miserable business as usual for you, because trying to measure up only brings us down. Trying to measure up only brings us down. And here's the truth, guys. There is no win in comparison. Nobody wins in comparison. And there's no end to that quest to measure up to the ideals of what culture says we should be, the perfect lives that we see other people that wear masks on social media and just put stuff up there to make themselves look just as good as they possibly can. And we know that's not the truth, but that we try to live by that ideal. And that's because measuring up is impossible. Even if you're more whatever than one person, someone else is going to be more whatever than you are. And that's why you never get one good thing from comparing yourself to somebody else. The only thing you get is more insecurity, more worry, more discontentment, more distraction, more overspending, more bad decision making, and a seriously bad mood. Trying to measure up only brings you down. It's like chasing the wind. It's meaningless. Now, it's true, there is something inside of all of us that we're looking for. Something in somebody to tell us that you're okay. That you're okay the way you are. There's nothing wrong with you. You're right where you need to be. You're good enough. So the question I want to leave with you tonight, and we'll go to groups in a few minutes and talk about this too, is where are you looking for answers to that question? Where are you chasing after the wind? Okay? Where are you living dissatisfied because you don't think you're prettier or smarter? Does a person or a group of people define that for you, your dissatisfaction? Is it a performance thing or a looks thing? Is it a social status thing? Is it a number of likes thing? Because Solomon, all these years ago, says if you look to your left, you look to your right, eventually you just clench your fists and grab as much as you can, but you never feel like you're okay. You always fall short. And guys, the bottom line here tonight is this. I said this a couple weeks ago at our celebration night, the one big party. And that is that the bottom line is that you need to know that you are loved. You need to understand that you are loved. And some of you don't feel that one bit where you're sitting there tonight. And so because of that, all these other insecurities manifest themselves in your life because you're driven by the fact that you don't feel that love, you don't realize that's happening. But listen to me. This is how God sees you. I wish you would hear this tonight. God sees you as his child. He accepts you just the way that he made you, just the way that you are. His love is changeless for you. He loves you for who you are, right where you are, even in the middle of your mess. He's proud of you because he sees your potential and sees what he's made and what you can become. And if you really believed that, if you really grabbed hold of that tonight, it would go the longest way towards the way you act in these areas, the way you treat other people in these areas, because you would feel safe. You would feel secure. You would always feel like someone else had your back. So I want to ask you 3 questions as we close this part here tonight. And I want you to think honestly about how you would answer these, because I think most of us in the room could come up with a pretty quick answer to these 3 questions. Number 1, who are you trying to keep up with? Who is it you look to, whether you realize it or it's kind of subconscious, you're always looking to try to keep up with? Number 2, what do they have that you don't that's keeping you from enjoying what God's given you? What does that other person that you're trying to keep up with, or that group of people, have that you don't have that's keeping you from enjoying life the way God wants you to? And then third question is this: who would you secretly enjoy seeing fail? Serious. It's just the way we think in our human nature. You feel like you're holding on to some imaginary better than others title. It makes you feel like you measure up, and that makes you cheer for others to somehow fail so that you somehow will look better. We do that stuff in our minds. Who are you trying to keep up with? What do they have that you don't that's keeping you from what God has for you? Imagine what it would be like to let that comparison go. It'd be like a weight, a huge weight for some of you lifted off your chest. How much less you'd stress about every day. How much less exhausted you'd be with all the drama that entails. Remember, trying to measure up only brings us down. There's no benefit. Quit looking around to your left and to your right. Find out if you're okay. Stop chasing after the wind and choose to let go of those things altogether and be loved by the person, and the one person who does not disappoint, and the one who will never let you down and will love you fully and completely forever. All right, let's close in prayer. God, tonight, you see our hearts. You know our thoughts. You know our attitudes. And sometimes, if we're just real and honest before you, they don't look so good. It's so easy for us, God, to be caught up in the whirlwind of life around us, and to look to our left and to our right and to see somebody else doing something better than we do, and to simply say, that's who I want to be, that's what I want to do. And God, that's not bad if we're just striving to be living a life of excellence, but in the end, so often it doesn't end there. It ends at a dead-end street, saying that I'm not good enough, or I can't achieve that goal, or I wish I was that person. When, Lord, each and every person in this room is fearfully and wonderfully made. That's what you tell us. In your word, you remind us that you knew us before we were even born. You knit us together in our mother's womb. And you look at us as priceless and precious and cherished and loved. And that should be enough for us to feel safe and accepted and secure. So we can quit playing this comparison game and just being the person that God created us to be. Lord, would you help us to just take the blinders off our eyes and not live by our culture or by the lie that we should be like someone else. The only person that we want to imitate is you, Jesus. We want to learn to encourage others and to serve others and to lift others up, and not try to measure up
that brings us down or someone else down. Lord, tonight I know you've spoken to some hearts in this area because this is real life. I pray right now, even in this moment, that students in this room would say, God, help me. God, help me to see myself the way you see me and to start living my life for an audience of one. We pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Let's stand together.